Hey everybody, Ian here, and today I'm going to talk about archery practice. So, one of the things I've been wanting to do for a while is just kind of go through my exercise routine, or like how I actually practice shooting my bow. I shoot quite often, especially when it starts to warm up. This winter has been a little bit rough. Luckily, I was able to shoot a league, so every Friday I was actually able to shoot my bow. But as it warms up, I tend to shoot more often. It eventually turns into an everyday thing. And one of the things that I wanted to share with everybody is just what I do to practice and how I get better with shooting and what I tend to work on, what I want to focus on, you name it. Now, to preface all this, I'm not a professional shooter by any means. I'm not necessarily a fantastic shooter by any means. But just kind of going throughout, throwing out some stuff here and there that A, I've heard from other people that are really good shooters and professional shooters, and B, just some things that I've found that tend to work for me to fix certain things that I struggled with and still struggle with, and that have actually helped me become way more consistent and way more accurate with shooting a bow. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about, or the first things I do when I get out there, is I kind of do like a little warm-up round and just build up some confidence, just make sure my technique and the execution of the shot is spot on. So usually what I'll do with this, and particularly what's going on right now with me, is, if anyone's seen this, I actually shoot a handheld release versus an index release, but this process can work with either. So I shoot a handheld release, and this is the TrueFire Synapse release, which I have done a review, and I've shot this for over a year now, and this is actually the release I'm going to use when I hunt. It's just a little bit more reliable versus the next release I'm about to tell you that I actually got, that I'm going to use in conjunction with this release to kind of help work on this. So just preface everything where I'm from at right from the get-go. I'm working on actually trying to shoot more from a back tension style release. So back tension, if you don't know, brief rundown of what that is basically when you go to actually pull back and you're trying to release the bow. As you're going to release the shot, you're actually pulling with this hand, you're actually pulling, and you're going to pull through the shot to get that surprise release. Switches your brain from focusing on this part in the bow going off, and puts it more, as you develop this technique, more on actually focusing where the arrow and where you want the arrow to go. At least that's what I found with me. And that's the advantages of using that back tension. You get the surprise release, but your attention is more focused on settling the pin on the spot that you want, and you're burning a hole in that spot and sending the arrow right there. That's perfect wise example. That's what I'm trying to go for. Last week, went to Hamburg to the Sportstrom. While I was out there, I stopped at Cabela's, and I've been wanting to try one of these releases for a while, and I actually picked up the TrueFire Sear. And if you don't know anything about the Sear, it's a hinge release. So what a hinge release does is, the only way to fire this is just a stud to kind of help give you some leverage to pull the bow back. The way that this release actually works is that you have to use back tension to fire this release. You hook up, and once you're set, you start to pull, it rotates, and as it rotates, you're going to hear a click, like that, and then bam, it'll release. But the only way really to fire this release is by back tension, you pulling, and that release starting to rotate. I got this release, and I'm going to use this in tandem with the Synapse release, my thumb button release, with the goal of being able to fire this release, the thumb button release, the same exact way I have to actually set off the hinge release. So for those that are looking to get into hand releases, there's an option for you, and I'll explain a little bit why I'm doing that. It's really just to cement everything all the way through in the back tension, and what the hinge release does is just kind of basically forces you to work on doing that. When I do my practice, where I'm at right now, I will take this hinge release, go at 10 yards, and I'll just shoot a bunch. I'll just shoot 5 arrows, Just focusing, or as many arrows as I feel confident that I've actually got everything, the technique down. I got that solid. I'm confident in my shot execution, the whole process. Then what I'll usually do from there is I'll do the same kind of warm up. Instead of 10 yards, I'll maybe back it up to 30 yards, and I'll do the same thing, shoot that, shoot that, shoot that. Then, now this is where the work comes in. And at this particular point where I'm at, I like to do things. I don't necessarily just sit and do the same thing all the time. So one of the exercises I've developed doing is I have 5 arrows in the quiver on my bow. Reason why I have the quiver on my bow when I shoot is because primarily when my hunting style is I'm not always in a let understand. Sometimes when I go to public land, I'm on the ground. I don't have a saddle or anything to set the quiver down. In the way the bow, I have it balanced and set up. It's with the quiver on because I'm going to shoot with that on. So that's why. It's just a preference thing. Yes, some people tell me, why take the quiver off, you'll shoot better. Well, in my hunting style, the way I like to hunt, can't do that. So I'm going to just make do with having the quiver on my bow, and I'm going to shoot it that way. The exercise that I've developed is I have 5 arrows, and I'm going to shoot 1 arrow in 10-yard increments from 10 out to 50. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm focusing on the same target point. So if I have like a smaller bag, like we have a smaller bag and we have a bigger bag. The smaller bag, I'll focus on that center circle. And my goal is to try and make a tight grouping in that center circle with 1 arrow shot at 10 yards, 20, 30, 40, all the way up to 50. And trying to get that group as tight as I can. So what that does progressively, as you actually start closer, it's easier because you're closer, but as you get farther out, it gets harder. So what that does is you increase your distance going back, and it magnifies any imperfections that you have, any kind of twitches you still have, and it just works overall on your technique and shot execution. So having that exercise works on the mental side of shooting and just making sure I'm being consistent no matter what yardage I'm shooting at. I'm being consistent with that approach. And then you can also take that same exercise and actually walk it from 50 back to 10. So you can start harder, get easier, or start easier, get harder, depending on what you want to do. I'll usually start, right now, I usually start off doing those exercises with the hinge. I'll shoot 5 arrows, do the exercise once with the hinge, and then I'll switch back and do the exercise again, and I'll have the thumb button. And the goal is when I use the thumb button, this is like the application of me doing a hunting and using my hunting release, where I'm trying to actually apply the same technique that I just did with the hinge. Now, if there's something technical that I want to make sure I'm honing on or working on in terms of stamina, being able to hold the bow, more so the shot execution part of it, I will take, actually I've done this with any release, index release, the thumb button, or the hinge, and I'll actually go back to as far back as I can, where I have a lane to shoot. So right now it's about 75 yards. I'll sit at 75 yards and I'll shoot a group. I'll shoot 5 arrows. I'll shoot that until I get tired. And what that does, and this is something if you're familiar with like Cameron Haynes, look him up. He practices shooting at 160 yards. But Ian, who's gonna take a shot at an animal at 160 yards? That seems a little reckless. Well, no duh. I'm not going to shoot at an animal at 100 yards off the get-go. If I need to try and put more arrows in that, then yeah, I'll take that, try that. But really what happens, the further back you go, the more it magnifies any imperfections that you have in your shooting technique. So I like to practice shooting at 75, and I've done this for the past 2 years that I've actually really gotten back into shooting a bow and shooting a lot, is I practice more at the farther ranges because it helps me develop more consistency with my grip and my shot execution. So if I can sit there and make some really awesome groups at 75 or 80 or 100, depending on whatever you do, then when you get up into the 10, 20, 30, 40, and my cap is 40, and that's under some very specific circumstances in terms of my hunting range, once you get up to 40, it seems so much easier because you're used to having to try and settle that pin more longer than if you're at 20, 30, 40. So that's why I'll even take it all the way back to 70 yards and practice at these longer ranges, just so I can develop and hone my technique. Because archery, as you know, is very technique driven in terms of whatever you develop, if it works for you and you're consistent, you'll have success. On a side note, for those that, even if you shoot an index release and you're trying to dabble, maybe thinking about dabbling in hand releases, or you're struggling with target panic, if you're shooting an index release, I actually recommend that you get a hand release, not necessarily to hunt with, but one for you to practice and shoot with. It's advantageous for you to actually know how to shoot all kinds of releases. But the reason why I say get like a hinge release or a back tension type release or anything like that, not necessarily from because you can shoot an index release back tension wise. You can do that. But it's more so what using a hinge release like the Sear is going to do to your mind. If you struggle with target panic, and you can look up what target panic is, just about everybody develops it at some point. This release, or a back tension style release where there's no trigger, I can't fire this unless I do it in a certain motion or a certain way that involves me having to pull or rotate. More so the pulling. Resistance release actually would work probably the best for this. What it does is it brings your target panic straight up to your face. You will be like, at least for me, when I first started to shoot this, the first day I got it, I could feel the anxiety that I've had. And I really haven't had target panic all that much. I punched it a little bit, but I was consistent. I was good. But you have to face your demons. So I'm trying to face my demons, which is target panic and that anxiety of being in the shot, trying to settle the pin and being like, just send it, which you can manage that, but if it can overcome you over time because your brain doesn't like to be surprised. It doesn't like to be surprised. It wants to know what it's going to do, and it's going to prepare your body and make your body do things to protect itself. So that's where the flinching comes in. So having a back tension style release where you can't punch it, you can't send it when you want. I mean, you could sit there and just torque your hand and do it. You can, but you're not going to be accurate in doing it. You're not going to have really any success in doing that. So when I pulled this back for the first time and actually settled on the pin, and I'm sitting there going through the whole process, pulling, feeling it rotate, hear the click. The click kind of scared me for a minute. I was like, oh shit. The click's kind of you're letting know it's about to go. So that way you just have a little bit of a heads up, just a bit. So it was okay, now we're ready to go. And then you can go through and pull through and fire. But the amount of anxiety that I felt where it's just I want to send it right now. I haven't had to deal with that in a while because my brain figured out a way to compensate with the thumb button. With this, I can't compensate with that. This past week at League, I actually switched between using the hinge and using my thumb button. I was more accurate with the thumb button than I had been the entire year. The amount of confidence that I had that I would send that arrow exactly where I wanted to go with this was at an all-time high, just from shooting one of these for a week. So in my routines, I'll switch between using the hinge or using the thumb button. I'll switch between the two, just make sure that I'm constantly doing the same thing no matter what release I have in my hand. I'm doing the same thing regardless. So that way it's the same approach, consistency all the way around. Woo! Just a quick wrap up. Exercises that I do a warm-up. I usually do really close, just to fine-tune, get some confidence, just kind of get the warm up the muscles, get the routine, get familiar again with how I shoot, anchor point, that whole thing. My basic process, centering my mind into ready to shoot my bow. Then I'll go back to 30 yards or 40 yards, kind of go back just a little ways and just make sure I'm working on that, tuning it up, going okay, all right, let's make sure that our focus is really all there. Then from there, depending on what I want to work on, depending on where I feel that I'm at, I can either work on my technique or I can work on the mental side of things. I'm going to work both, but in terms of what order I do it nowadays, it doesn't really matter because it's going to hit both. So one of the things that I could do is, in terms of an exercise, would be that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, doing the one arrow at each 10-yard increment or any yardage increment that you want. You can break it up there, but you have to shoot one arrow at a different distance each time. Again, works the mental and consistency in your approach, as well as making sure executionally you're doing it right. But it's more so just making sure you're consistent and working the mental aspect of shooting your bow. Then if I want to focus more on my technical skill, I'll go back and shoot longer ages. Not saying you have to shoot 75 yards or 100 yards. You could even, if your comfortable box right now is 50 yards, do 50 yards. If your comfortable box is 40 yards, do 40 yards. If it's comfortable at 60 yards, do 60 yards. But you have to shoot at those longer ranges for longer amounts of time. Is basically what I'm getting at. That's what I do. I shoot at longer distances to focus more on my technical aspects in terms of how I actually release and just see, okay, well, why did that arrow do this? Well, I did this. And then I can go through and work on that and actually build up some endurance. And basically, that's all I do. Nothing super fancy. But with that last exercise that I do, my challenge is to all of you, especially if you're new into archery or you're wanting to just get better as an archer, period. You have to do things to take yourself out of your comfort zone. Always push, make that box that you're in bigger. And don't be upset if you suck for a while or you stink for a while. You're not seeing that success that you want right away. You have to work at that. Archery is about working. You have to work for that success and that skill. It's not something you can just inherently just pick up the ball and go. This isn't Matrix. It's not like the programs like in our heads. You have to work at that. It's like anything in life or anything that we choose to do. You have to put in the work, but always try to push that box, make it bigger. If you're comfortable shooting 50, if you have the sight and the abilities to go shoot at 60, go shoot at 60. Until that gets comfortable. Then go back even farther. Test yourself. Push yourself. Don't be afraid of that. If you lose an arrow, you lose an arrow. Rather lose the arrow now than make a bad shot on a deer. At least that's my mentality. Is I'm putting in the work now so that way when that moment of truth comes, I'm going to do my job as quickly and efficiently as possible. Because that's what the animal, our prey species, deserve. It's not things will happen, but it's my job to mitigate my issues on my end. And that's why I shoot every day and I do what I do. And I keep trying to push my box out. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button below. Spring's coming. Hopefully we'll be able to get out at least a little bit. It's Corona time right now, so I'm not sure how much. We haven't been quarantined yet, but I can at least get outside and avoid people for a little bit and at least just be able to get away from like inside my car to that. And then, yeah, I can be able to do that. So we're going to have some videos coming. So make sure you hit that red subscribe button. Turn on that bell for the notifications every time a video is uploaded. We all have lives here at 585 Outdoors. We are actually average people. So sorry that content is coming out all the time, but when it does come out, we really would like you guys to be able to see that notification and check that out. And if you haven't yet, also check the link in the description of this video to our Teespring store so you can pick up some awesome merch and rock your 585 pride. You can pick up a hoodie, a t-shirt, anything like that, and it would greatly support us and help bringing this content to you. And also, it's pretty awesome to rock something that says 585 Outdoors because it's not like it's just representing me. It's representing all of us here, especially here in the 585, especially if you live in the 585. So with that, I'm going to shut up now. I hope you guys enjoyed this, found this useful in some ways insightful, guiding. I'm not a pro, but this is just things that I do that help me. So that, I'm Ian. See you guys on the next one.